talking about trees. What is a tree? How do they work? The benefits they can bring, how great they are for pollutants. But then today I wanted to talk about something a lot of people don't consider, and that is what trees do for their immediate area. So a lot of times, and rightfully so, I'm not saying you should pick a tree for other reasons. When we select a tree, we're looking for aesthetic. Do I want a conifer, or do I want deciduous? Do I want flowering? Do I want fruit? Do I want neither? Do I want columnar? Do I want a small tree? All of those factors, and they are very important. You don't want to buy the wrong tree for the wrong part of your garden and then realize that you've either got to cut it down or you're trying to transplant it or whatever. So that is absolutely essential when selecting a tree. But it's all of the other fringe benefits that a tree gives to us. And that's kind of what we're talking about. You know, yesterday we mentioned the great things trees do for us, the biodiversity, cooling a house down, keeping a house warm, all of that good stuff. But what about what trees do in their immediate vicinity for themselves in that immediate patch of land per se? So we all know that trees are one of the two lungs of the planet. The two lungs of the planet are the massive equatorial rainforests and the oceans. They sequester a ton of carbon and give out incredible amounts of oxygen. And we talked about that, was that Tuesday? I think that was Tuesday. But what about what else trees bring? So when we look at a tree, and again, we're looking at it for its beauty and its stature and everything else, what we might not realize is the benefits it brings. And one of the things it does very well is it helps the soil around it. So when we put a tree and we plant around it, that's actually a good thing. So a lot of times, I don't know if you've ever heard, and you will have seen this, I'm sure. I've absolutely seen it numerous times, and not just because of the landscaping I've done in the gardens I've been in. You see it all over the place. And we get heavy rain like this. And you go out and you look, and if you have a flower bed, a garden bed, running down next to a garage or down next to your pathway, and there's soil that is splashed out onto the path because the rain's hit it so hard, because that's actually called splash erosion. It has a name, and when you take areas that get torrential rain and you've taken out all of the trees for whatever reason, agriculture or building a new subdivision or houses or whatever, the trees aren't there to prevent that. So when the rain is hammering down and there's nothing to intercept it, it comes from the clouds onto the ground, you get that splashback. You'll see rain, what you call bouncing off the pavement. Now you go look where there's a big tree and the ground around it is wet, there's puddles, but it's not bouncing off the pavement. The tree is taking all of the impact and allowing the moisture to get through. So the ground is still getting saturated, but it's not that damaging splash. It's not hurting the small plants or causing splash erosion. So trees are really instrumental in preventing that. And then they also, the other factor is they dry soil. So if you have an area, and again, with all the rain we had, absolutely, I've seen this. So right here in Calgary on Nose Hill, where I walk Jimmy, there's a big area at the top, and there's no trees. They're all gone. There's a big sea can. It looks like they did some work there. And after rain, that whole area floods into like a little mini lake, and it's great. The dogs love it. You hear frogs and crickets, and I'm sure that's what the city did it for. It's fantastic. Bring a wet area. Now, right next to that, maybe 500 meters away, there's another area at the bottom. It's like a gulch, and it fills with water as well. But that is filled with trees. Now, both of them get the same amount of rain. They're both at the top of the hill. They're both exposed. The one that has the trees, the water disappears way quicker than the one without it. So I've been to both areas routinely every night. And the one that has the trees, the water level has gone down significantly. It's maybe that deep, where after the rainfall it was that deep. The mini lake is still right there. Jimmy actually has to swim in part of it. And that's because of the trees. The roots are pulling that moisture up at an alarming rate. If you remember what we talked about on Tuesday for photosynthesis, and then they're getting rid of the moisture through transpiration. So not only is the sun absorbing it, the ground's absorbing it, the tree's like, let me help you. So it's actually allowing the soil to dry out, which allows it to breathe, so the roots of the smaller plants aren't being suffocated. Then another thing that those same roots are doing is they're binding the soil. So I think everybody's heard about the infamous, I certainly don't want to say famous here, California mudslides. Trees help prevent mudslides. And it's not planting, you wouldn't, well, in California you could probably put this outside. It's not planting a small tree like that. It's the old growth trees that have these ridiculous root systems we can't even fathom. It would take a lifetime to try and dig up all of the roots on some of these trees. And all of those roots, and they all meet and they all mix, hold the soil in place. So while you can plant and other plants can grow in there and whatnot, the tree is locking most of the earth into place. And that's called soil binding. And it prevents mudslides, and it prevents landslides and erosion. And again, that is formed by the trees just doing their thing. They are not doing it intentionally. However, the benefit of the tree is if that soil were to leave and their roots were to be exposed, they would die. So it behooves them to hold that soil around their base, and then it keeps everything else. It keeps us safer, allows the other plants to grow because now they have security. And then there's a windbreak. And the reason that's important, again, if you're in Calgary, we know about wind. Lethbridge more so. And a lot of people plant trees to break the wind. So if you don't have the trees, that soil is going to dry out really fast from the sun and the rain. There's no shade, or the wind, sorry, not the rain. The sun and the wind combined, which we get a lot of here in Calgary, dries that soil out. It can make it like dust. We get a hard wind and it blows all of that soil. Well, then the trees intercept that. So much like they did with the rainfall, to prevent splash erosion, they prevent wind erosion. So that wind that would blow all of that dry topsoil away, it goes from a 40 kilometer an hour gust to a 10 kilometer an hour gust. Have you ever been in the mountains? In the winter is the best time to tell, and the wind is hitting you and you're like, this is unbearably uncomfortable. It's minus 40, and then you step into the tree line and you're like, this is awesome.
Yeah, and it's quiet too.
Yeah, it's instantly that rushing sound of the wind, all of that chaos stops.
Yeah, it's
and
eerie.
Like,
yeah.
And it feels warm. It's still minus 5 or minus 10 or whatever. But the trees have now protected you from that. Well, they're doing the same with the soil. They are acting as a natural windbreak to preserve the soil. And then another thing, and this is going to tie us to the last one I want to bring up, is trees add nutrients to the soil. So anybody who's ever had to, who has a big tree on their property and they're there in September and October know that a tree drops stuff. Twigs and leaves and blah, blah, blah. Well, naturally, they're going to compost in. They're going to break down. They act as a natural mulch for the tree. That's why when you're in the forest and you take a handful of soil, it is the richest soil you're going to find. It is just pure compost, naturally composted. But another way that they do it, so the fruits, the leaves, the bud casings, small branches, twigs, large logs, we don't want them in our garden, but they break down very slowly. Fungus gets on them and helps them break it down even quicker. However, if you remember, one of the points I brought up yesterday was biodiversity. And in trees, you will often find birds, bats, and any number of insects, just right off the top of my head. Well, every living thing has to poop, including insects, and all of that falls down, and it actually adds nutrients to the soil. Now, like any fertilizer, anything like that, if you have way too much of any one kind of thing, you're going to choke it out. hence the biodiversity. That's what is so important about it, is having that guano and the frass and the poop all mixed together with the leaves, with the fruit, with the little twigs, breaking down, and it enriches the soil. It's actually replenishing the soil. And again, that's happening, and it's feeding the tree. So the tree is like, this is an awesome win. Like, I'm loving this. And then this doesn't really apply to us, but I think it's phenomenal. So in mankind's quest for doing things and growing food and corporate and greed, absolutely, we have cut down massive swaths of forest for agriculture. But what they were finding at an alarming rate, and this is how crazy we can be as a species, they would cut down these trees and they would do industrial agriculture. Well, after a season 2, max 3, the soil was unusable. It wasn't growing anything. So they cut down more trees and used that soil. And then they would cut down more. And behind them, they're leaving this barren wasteland. And what they realized is it was the trees that were preventing the splash erosion, the wind erosion. They were binding the soil together, and they were adding these nutrients through their own litter and through biodiversity, that the soil was so rich for them to grow crops in the first place. But they were literally eliminating their own food source. Well, now researchers have found something called fertilizer trees. And there's one, and if you're a fan of Indian food, you probably may have heard of tamarind. Mm-hmm. The tamarind tree, what they have found, actually pulls nitrogen out of the air, brings it in, so it's feeding its own leaves. The nitrogen it doesn't use, it leaches out into the soil as deep as 3 feet into the soil, and it's boosting the nitrogen which they need to grow crops. So now they're planting tamarind trees in their crop fields. They're stopping splash erosion, they're stopping wind, they're preventing shade. The tamarind is a very almost like a fern-like leaf. So sunlight is still able to get through, and they're fixing the nitrogen, they're bringing the animals back, and the biodiversity is feeding the soil. And we've almost come full circle. This isn't trees per se, but back years and years and years ago, decades ago, people grew plants in living soil. Then they decided, hey, do you know what's better is growing it in pure peat moss, and then we add all of the nutrients. And then somebody said, what about hydroponic, where it doesn't even have any soil, and we just pour liquid nutrients in and feed it with that? And then somebody said, oh my God, have you tried growing them in living soil? And we've literally come full circle. The best thing to grow your plants in is living soil. Is a genuine living soil made up of all that, of compost and manures and worm castings and charcoals. All of that, volcanic minerals getting mixed in creates a much better growing environment. And trees have been providing that for years. So not only do trees give us all, they clean pollution, they make the world a brighter, better place, and without soil we don't live. We do not live, and trees protect that resource for us too. So absolutely amazing thing that a lot of us just take for granted. We go, oh yeah, that's a nice spruce. Oh, look at those pretty flowers. I like lilacs. That's as much thought as we give, and that's great. Give that thought. Enjoy the aesthetics, but also understand how crucially important trees are, not just for the aesthetic, but for everything else they bring to the table. So trees, yes, they are that awesome.
Yeah.
And that wraps us up. As you can tell, I can go on a lot longer about this. I'm pretty passionate about these subjects. But I find it amazing. You know, it would be different if it did all of that and they didn't even look pretty. Maybe I'd be like, yeah, that's kind of a pain in the butt. But they're awesome to look at too. And apples.
Yeah,
eh?
obviously.
Yeah, peaches.
Yes.
Go to BC. Yeah, there's so much that trees can give us. So that wraps us up. Hawaiian Shirt Friday tomorrow, and our last webinar of webinar season on Saturday.
Yeah.
We're going to talk watering and then some good garden tips to get you through the season.
Yeah, we're 50% sold, so better get on it.
There we go. And yeah, sneak peek. They're going to mention it on CTV. So yeah, get your tickets early. Have a great day. Stay dry, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Bye, everyone.